The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. At that time, Jesus came down to Jericho and intended to pass through the town. Now a man there named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector and also a wealthy man, was seeking to see who Jesus was. But he could not see him because of the crowd, for he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree in order to see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. When he reached the place, Jesus looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, come down quickly, for today I must stay at your house." And he came down quickly and received him with joy. When they all saw this, they began to grumble, saying, "He has gone to stay at the house of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Behold, half of my possessions, Lord, I shall give to the poor. And if I have extorted anything from anyone, I shall repay it 4 times over." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a descendant of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save what was lost." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
As a priest, I've met my fair share of people who feel spiritually lost, people who feel far from God, who haven't been able to pray in a long time, perhaps, who might feel isolated or distant from the community of the church, people who might be caught in cycles of sin or addiction. It's not an uncommon experience for people to feel lost, spiritually lost. Zacchaeus, the protagonist in today's gospel, is spiritually lost. He's a chief tax collector, which means that he knows how to game the system, making his wealth at the expense of his fellow citizens. He's collecting taxes on behalf of the Roman occupier, which doesn't earn him many friends. He's living life solely for himself, to enrich himself. In fact, the gospel describing him as short in stature may be a way of saying that Zacchaeus' real problem is that he's small in character. He has serious moral shortcomings. And another hint in the gospel at how low he has fallen, Zacchaeus lives in Jericho, one of the lowest places on earth in terms of its sea level. So what today's gospel is trying to tell us, it's trying to tell us something about Zacchaeus, and that's that he's lost, he's spiritually lost. But Jesus is passing through. And Zacchaeus makes the most important, most consequential decision of his life. He climbs a tree to seek to see who Jesus is. He climbs a tree to look at Jesus. And then Jesus looks at him. Naturally, Jesus looks at Zacchaeus, for Jesus is drawn to those who are lost. Jesus has come to seek and to save what was lost. And so Jesus looks at and calls by name the biggest sinner in the lowest place on earth. Zacchaeus, come down, for today I must stay at your house. Jesus desired to enter under the roof of this lost, unworthy, and broken soul. And Zacchaeus responded rightly. He came down quickly and received Jesus with joy. He received Jesus into his home, into his life. And this encounter with Jesus changed Zacchaeus forever. It changed the direction of his life. He converted. And how was his conversion expressed? By a concern for the poor, by a generous sharing of his goods, and by acting justly toward his neighbors. The encounter with Jesus, Zacchaeus looking at Jesus and Jesus looking at him and calling him by name, enabled Zacchaeus to discover his vocation. Being a tax collector wasn't Zacchaeus' vocation. It was just a way of enriching himself. But once Zacchaeus had encountered the Lord in a real and personal way, he would no longer live solely for himself. Rather, he would live his true identity as a righteous person, as a just person. For that's what the Hebrew name Zacchaeus really means. Literally means righteous and just. So Jesus' calling of Zacchaeus was an invitation to Zacchaeus to discover his true self, and so to let his life flourish and bear fruit. Friends, Jesus is drawn to you and to me when we're feeling far from God, when we feel isolated, distant from our true selves and from others, when we're perhaps caught in a cycle of sin or addiction. Jesus is drawn to you and to me when we're feeling lost, spiritually lost. Naturally, for Jesus is drawn to those who are lost. Jesus has come to seek and to save what was lost. Even if we forget God, God doesn't forget us. In our lowest place and in the midst of our worst sins, he looks upon us and he calls us by name, inviting us to discover our true selves in his light, and thus letting our lives flourish and bear fruit. That's what Pope Francis says what finding one's vocation is all about. It's about finding your true self in the light of God, and thus letting your life flourish and bear fruit. As Father Brian mentioned at the beginning of Mass, this week is National Vocation Awareness Week. In that spirit, let's remember that our first and common vocation as all the baptized is the vocation to love. It's the vocation to live life not as our own property to be lived solely for ourselves, but to live life as a gift to be given generously in the service of others. Now, as the director of vocations for the priests and brothers of Holy Cross, it's my joy and privilege to talk to you briefly about our community and about our mission. We're a men's congregation. There are many great women's congregations out there, the Holy Cross Sisters being one of them. As for us, priests and brothers of Holy Cross, we're men who, like Zacchaeus, heard the call of the Lord. For some of us, it was a call discerned while in high school or even earlier. For others, while in college. For still others, after graduation from college. And the call led us all here to the congregation of Holy Cross. We are priests and brothers serving as educators in the faith, in parishes, in missions in 16 countries around the world, and in colleges and universities, including Notre Dame. Our motto is Ave Crux Spes Unica, Hail the Cross, our only hope, our unique hope, our magnificent hope. And our mission is to make God known, loved, and served, and thus save souls. And we're looking for men to join us, men who wish to abandon all to follow Christ. If you're a single Catholic man between the ages of 17 and 35, and you want a meaningful and impactful way to spend your life in the service of others, if you want a life of purpose that allows you to make a difference in the world while striving for personal holiness and conformity to Christ, then consider joining us. Consider joining our brotherhood, our family, where you'll be encouraged to discover your true self in the light of God. And in discovering it, your life will flourish and bear fruit.